Hi YouTube, we're still in the coronavirus lockdown, so I can't really go to my studio and do too much. So I'm going to go through my guitar history up to this date, go through some of the guitars that I've owned over the years. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that I started out as a drummer, and I picked up guitar when I was about 16, just to kind of learn the basics and be able to write songs. So for quite a number of years, I only played the very basics of the guitar and just thought the rest was completely beyond me. It's only been in the last couple of years where I've really started doing things like taking lessons and pushing myself to learn techniques that I couldn't do before. So some of these choices might seem odd, but some of them are a very long time ago. So let's go through and look at some guitars. My first ever guitar would have been around 2001. I think I was 16 years old. It was a Yamaha Se150. Now, they were released around 1986, and I had no clue what it was. I didn't know what any of the features were for. It was just a guitar in a cool colour that I bought off a friend for not much money at all. Now, having looked back at the specs, it looks like they were trying to tap into the sort of shredder market in the 80s. The guitar had a tremolo and that kind of shredder kind of look to it. It looks very much an 80s guitar. It had something called a Campersperma body, which I've never heard of, but some places it's listed as basswood, so maybe it's a basswood alternative. It was in a shocking pink finish, and I read up that it had a Babinga fretboard, which is something I've not come across before or since. What I do remember is that I had no clue how the locking tremolo worked, other than the guy I bought it off told me that I could just tune it by using the little fine tuners at the base of the tremolo, and knowing no better, after about a month of owning it, the bridge was like this, and it was basically a bow and arrow, and I couldn't play it anymore. So I didn't last very long with that guitar, and I didn't really understand what it was that I was doing wrong, but there was no one to teach me, and I was basically just hitting it with power chords just to write dumb stuff. So I got rid of that guitar pretty quickly, and I bought a Squire Telecaster in candy red. Basically just the bog standard thing you'll find in pretty much any guitar shop. The sort of cheaper models that you sort of point out to new guitarists when you don't know what they're going to take to it or not. I do remember picking the Telecaster, having tried a couple of other sort of copies like SG copies and Les Paul copies, and just finding it way more comfortable and way more fun to play. I didn't really understand at the time things like, you know, single coils and humbuckers and stuff, and I didn't understand what was different about that guitar other than the fact I liked it a bit more, so that's what I got. My next guitar might seem quite an odd choice, and on reflection it probably was. It was a Squire Tundelung signature Strat. This guitar is, at this point I was in college doing a BTEC in popular music, which might not have been the best life choice, to be honest with you, but I had a friend on that course who had a really nice Fender Stratocaster, and he let me play it, and I liked it, but I didn't like all the control layout. I kept banging my big stupid hand into the dials and that kind of stuff, and to this day, if I play a Strat, I still don't like the placement of all the dials and that kind of thing. So what interested me about this guitar, other than the fact that, you know, this is around sort of 2001, 2002, Blink-182 were huge at the time, and I quite liked them. This guitar had a single humbucker and a single volume knob. By this point I was able to sort of string the basics of songs together, so I was kind of still working out what I liked and what I didn't like, and I remember that this played quite well and it sounded pretty decent. And around this time I started to actually look into things like the specs of guitars, and kind of had one of those great disappointment moments, because I really liked the look of Gibson SGs, and I was, you know, looking at pictures of them online, you know, in the days of dial-up internet, and, you know, checking out all the guitarists that use them. And I went to a local music shop, and for some strange reason, maybe the guy was feeling generous, he actually allowed us to take one of the hallowed Gibsons down off the wall and actually try a real Gibson SG. I don't know if he thought we might buy it because I didn't have any money, but I remember me and my friend trying this SG because he was mad on them as well and desperately wanted one, and it just sucked. It sounded like crap and it was uncomfortable to play. So that was the first time I started to think, you know, maybe the specs of the guitar make much more difference than I initially thought. But anyway, back to the Strat. It had an older body, again a single humbucker and a single volume control. And if I remember rightly, I remember being a bit disappointed that I think the place I bought it from advertised it having a Seymour Duncan pickup, but I don't think it actually did. But in the end I liked the simplicity of just having a humbucker and a volume control, and again for that sort of for that period, I think that guitar played pretty decent. I've no idea what happened to it. I think I must have sold it or give it away or something. The next guitar I still own to this day. It was my first proper guitar, and it is a Fender Mexican-made Telecaster. This would be about 2002, 2003. So it's that period of Telecasters where I think the specs on Mexican telly stayed the same for quite a number of years, I think. I still have this guitar, and to be honest, it needs a bit of TLC. I've kind of left it on the back burner for years, but it's been a really reliable guitar, and every time I've sort of picked up a guitar to play again and having taken a break, it's always that guitar that I go to. It has an older body, it's got a blue agave finish, it's basically a sparkly blue, maple neck and fretboard, and sort of standard telly layout. And as soon as I got this, me and my friend modified it. I still to this day don't know how we did it, because neither of us knew how to solder. But we put a Seymour Duncan little 59 humbucker in the bridge, which made it a much more meaty guitar, and I think that's probably the reason that I've kept it, is that it's got a lot of meat to it for a Telecaster. You know, for years I was into a lot of post-hardcore and that kind of stuff, and it was really able to do all the things that I needed. It was able to play sort of quite heavy tones and also the sort of standard, quite light telly stuff. I need to decide what I want to do with it, whether I want to kind of restore it as it's intended, or whether I want to put some upgrades on there to make it a bit more of a metal guitar, but we'll see. Again, that was the only guitar that I owned for years. I think the next thing that I bought was in 2010, I decided to get myself an acoustic guitar, and I went on a merry quest around the country trying to find the right one. This was in the days when blogging was a bit more popular than sort of video, because it was just easy to do then, and I was sort of documenting all the places I was going, the guitars I was trying. I ended up finding an absolute gem. I managed to get a Martin D15, one of the original mahogany ones, rather than the Sapel ones, which they later made. I managed to find it in a place called Oswestry, and I got a really good deal on it. And it's an absolutely beautiful acoustic, and I still have it and I still use it, and it's absolutely fantastic. For a number of years I barely played any music. I was focusing on competing in jiu-jitsu, and all my mind was focused on that, and additionally mangles your fingers, so I still have like pains in my hands and on my knuckles and stuff, which for a while I used as an excuse not to practice, but now I've realised that the more I practice, the less it hurts. A number of years I only had the Telecaster and didn't really think much about sort of making music. I'd kind of got sick of being in bands and stuff. Even though I was playing drums, I got kind of sick of not being able to use my own songwriting ideas, because I wasn't the primary songwriter in the band, and I didn't know enough to kind of do the whole solo project thing. But then technology moved on, and I managed to get my first little home recording set up, and I realised I could do a lot of this stuff, and if I practiced I would improve. And at this point I've really started to get interested in extended range guitars. I think I've been turned off 7 strings, having tried some really cheap crap ones when I was a kid, when sort of nu metal was a thing, and we'd go down to a place called the Rock Cafe in Stourbridge on a Monday for a jam night, and it would be exclusively pop punk bands and sort of nu metal bands, and the nu metal bands always seemed to sound worse because they had these cheap sort of crap 7 strings that were just coming out at the time. But obviously the world's moved on since then, and obviously my own music tastes have moved on, and perhaps if I bought one of those crappy 7 strings back then I'd have been decent now, but there you go. So I knew I wanted a 7 string, and I was saving up for a Ibanez, but a Schecter Omen 8 string came up for sale about a mile away from where I lived for like a silly price really, and being quite cheeky I offered the guy an even lower price and he took it. I don't know why. So I went down the road and picked up a Schecter Omen 8 in a walnut finish. It had a basswood body, a rosewood fingerboard, and this was my first taste of an 8-string guitar. And to be honest, I really like that guitar. I am not entirely sold on 8 strings for me. I think it goes past the point of comfort in terms of the size of the fretboard. But I had a lot of fun with that guitar. What I found though was that I didn't really utilise the low string, I think, how some of the better 8-string guitarists do. I tended to just hit the low open and hope for the best. But I did enjoy the scale length. I did enjoy the other 7 strings, and I was learning sort of 7-string songs, just ignoring the I think what was a low F at the time. I paid £250 for that guitar, and it played really, really well. I didn't really like the pickups that much. I think they're stock Schecter ones, but for the money, that was a really decent entry into 8 strings. I probably wouldn't get another 8 string. What I maybe would consider in the future is taking the lower strings from the 8 string set and putting them onto a standard 7 and just ignoring the high string and seeing if that's more to my liking. At this point, I'd saved up for an order of my Ibanez, which took over a year to build. So in this period, I was looking at other guitars and seeing what else was about. And I used my Schecter in a trade plus cash to get the next guitar. So I took that guitar to London and traded with a guy. I traded for an Ibanez Rg IT20FE, which is part of their Iron Label series, and a really, really nice guitar. I kind of regret getting rid of it in the end, but it was a through neck with an ash body. It was in this really nice dark black finish, which was like a stain, so you could still see the ash wood grain through and the neck through wood. It had EMGs in it, which I didn't hate, but I didn't really like either. So I swapped those out for a set of bare knuckle. I think I had a painkiller in the bridge and a cold sweat in the neck, and then it sounded absolutely phenomenal. Got rid of the active electronics in there, and it had a kill switch, which I didn't need. So I got a local electronics guy to mod that for me, so that when I flicked the switch, it would always coil split the neck, which was a nice little feature to have. Probably a bit more work than it was worth, but it was cool on that guitar. And I owned that guitar for quite a while, and that was my main 6 string. Recorded with it in the studio when bands would come around, and I think that guitar was, you know, for the Iron Label series, which was meant to be like a mid-level series, I think that was, you know, probably a bit of a gem, to be honest. I don't know if they're all like that, but that particular one was great. So not long after I got the Iron Label, my Ibanez was finished, and it is one of the beautiful guitars I've ever seen. It was a custom shop order from Ibanez in, I think it's pronounced Gdansk in Poland. Every Ibanez you order is a custom shop, and they're all works of art, and this one was no exception. It's a Devel Elite 7 with a baritone neck, mahogany body, poplar burl top with a transparent aquamarine finish. I had bare knuckle nail bombs installed in it with my old logo laser etched onto the face of the pickups, and it also had a ghost piezo system. Now, this guitar is the one that I recorded the first Tetra EP with, the Portals EP. Recently, I've had problems with the electronics where something is going wrong with the piezo, so during lockdown I can't take it to a tech to get it sorted. I've kind of tried myself, and I think I probably made the problem worse, but the piezo on that guitar is absolutely phenomenal. That's how I do all the crystal clean sounds, and nothing else sounds quite like it. You can get pretty close by splitting the coils and doing some drastic EQ, but I don't know what it is about the piezo, but it just sounds amazing. And because of that, I'm now trying to have a piezo on all future guitars if I can, and the ones that I don't, I'm looking at how I can install them, although it looks a pretty difficult job, to be honest. It's just a shame that it's such a beautiful guitar and I'm not currently using it because I'm just waiting for a tech to sort out this issue with the piezo always being on. But I'm sure when I get it back, it's going to go back to the #1 slot. When I had the Ibanez for about a year, I started to think that I needed a lower value guitar for playing live, although it didn't turn out to be the case. But I started to get a bit worried about having a guitar that expensive on stage and getting knocked over and all sorts. And I've always loved the look of Ibanez Rgds, and I've tried a couple and really liked them. The next guitar which I got, the Ibanez Rgd Ir7m, came up initially as a limited edition model, although I think they just kept it in production. I don't know if they didn't sell enough of them, but it is a Iron Label series guitar. When it initially came out and when I bought it, it had a mahogany body, but they're now using the Arto. It's in this really beautiful laser blue finish. It's got a bird's eye maple fretboard, maple and purple heart neck, and Damasio Fusion Edge pickups. It's a long scale length guitar with a 26.5 inch scale length. Now, straight out the box, this was an okay guitar, but with some very minor mods, which I'll go through in detail in another video, this turned into probably my favourite guitar to record rhythms with, because it just sounds incredible. It's got a bare knuckle aftermath pickup in the bridge and a hip shot high mass bridge, which I replaced the original Gibraltar with, and that made a huge difference. So again, I've still got that guitar. I love recording with it. If you've heard our single Ghost in the Hills, all the rhythm guitars are from that guitar and a Pod XT Pro. So sometimes when you have ultra expensive and nice guitars, you still pick the cheap one because it sounds better. I was kind of getting bored of the black iron label, although now I kind of regret it. So I started to look about, see what else was around, and I realised when it came to 6 strings, I hadn't really settled on what it is that I liked. With 7s, I knew by that point that I liked a baritone, scale length, fixed bridge, you know, that kind of stuff. But I didn't really know, you know, what to do about 6 strings because I was playing almost exclusively 7-string stuff by then. So I started to see what it was about, and I found an Ibanez Rg652 Prestige that was in Rhyl in Wales, which is a place that's really important to me because I used to spend every summer there with my nan. And I managed to get the guy to agree to a trade, and I thought, why the hell not? So I drove to Rhyl, we did the trade, and I got the Ibanez Rg652. Now this guitar was a bit unlike what I'd had before, and it had some problems. Firstly, I realised within about 10 minutes of owning it, I really didn't like having a tremolo on the guitar. I thought that I might, and I'd read up on how to maintain them and all sorts, but when I had it in my hands, it just wasn't for me. Also, a previous owner had drilled into the body to install a really ugly mirror finish scratch plate, which I hoped I could fix and replace, but once I took the old pickguard off, I realised how bad he'd done a job of drilling into it. So even a new pickguard, which I thought would look quite nice with white pickups, it still didn't cover these drill holes that he'd made, and it was a bit disappointing, to be honest. So I got rid of that guitar almost immediately. However, I do have to say, with the stock pickups, I think it was a V7, it did sound great. Like when I was able to plug it in and play it, it was a really great sounding guitar. So I wouldn't rule out that guitar in the future if another one came up. I just think the tremolo wasn't for me, and the condition of it was not great, but you know, the skeleton of it was fine. You know, I had bad luck with that guitar, but then I had immediately some great luck in that I think the next day an Ibanez Rg652 a came up for sale in Cardiff in Wales, and by this point I was pretty accustomed to travelling around to pick up guitars, so I shot the guy a message, and even though he said no trades, I said, what about this problematic Ibanez I've got plus cash on top? And we agreed. I went out there, and this is probably the nicest 6-string I think I've ever played. So once again, it's the Ibanez Rg652a HM. It's got an ash body. It's got this beautiful nebula burst finish with gloss on the top, which really suits this guitar. It's got DiMarzio tone zone and Air Norton pickups, which I'll come back to in a minute. It's got a maple and walnut neck, which is really smooth and fun to play, with a bird's eye maple fretboard. Again, it's got all the sort of prestige edge treatment, so it's super comfortable to play. Locking tuners, fixed bridge, you know, really great guitar. The pickups are DiMarzio tone zone and Air Nortons, which are great, but I think I can push a bit more out of the guitar by upgrading the pickups and maybe some of the hardware. So in the future, I might look at this as a mod project, but only a very minor few things which are probably reversible as well, because it's already a great guitar. I think I can get a little bit more out of it. So that brings us up to the present day. So in general, I'll use the Ibanez for cleans when I'm recording. I'll use the Ibanez Rgd for my rhythm tones. I'll use the 6-string Rg652 when I want to sort of practice in standard tuning, or whether I want to record something that way. I use my Telecaster when I'm just here, just messing around. And I have another guitar on the way, which is my Kiesel, which I think I'm 3 or 4 weeks into my order now. It's already paid for, so as soon as it's built, it's going to come. And that's going to be an amalgamation of all the things I've found that I liked in guitars in one guitar, hopefully. So hope you enjoyed the video, and if you guys have got any cool stories about any of your guitars, drop them in the comments and let me know. Thanks.